Good morning, everyone. How are you doing? Thank you for joining this talk. My name is Saravanan. I'm working as a solution architect at Rabobank in the Netherlands. I'm basically from India. Today, we are going to talk about sustainable IT. How do we connect the dots to a greener future? I hope the clicker. Yeah. Can someone tell me which movie this image is from? The Matrix, indeed. Yeah, it's a no-brainer. In 1950, Isaac Asimov, the science fiction author, he published a series of short stories called I, Robot. These stories talk about machines taking over the world somewhere in the 21st century. Well, it is now 2024, and we are almost a quarter past the 21st century. Machines have indeed taken over the world. In fact, there are more machines and processors in this room than humans. And they are becoming more and more powerful as we speak. Let me give you an example. Can I ask all of you to take your smartphones? I hope no one has a phone like this now. And hold it in your hands like this. Thank you. Now I would like you to imagine this. You have more computing power in the palm of your hands than the Apollo 11 guidance computers that were used to fly man to the moon. The Apollo 11 guidance computers had a processing power of 14,000 floating point operations per second, whereas the smartphone in your hand has trillions of operations per second. You have a neural engine in the palm of your hands. To quote, or let's say paraphrase Neil Armstrong, it is indeed a giant leap for mankind, or in this case, artificial kind. But all this power comes at a cost. You know what Uncle Ben, I think, said to Peter Parker? With great power comes great responsibility. Yeah. But I say to you, with great computing power comes an even greater carbon footprint. But what is carbon footprint? Carbon footprint is nothing but the amount of greenhouse gases that are emitted as a result of our actions. So that includes the technology we use, the software code we write, and other things. So today, we are going to talk about these three topics. Why do we need to acknowledge sustainable IT and green software? What is green software, and how do we build expertise around it? And thirdly, how do we create an impact in the right direction? And that ties to the title, to connect the dots to the greener future. So, let's get into the details. Why do we need to acknowledge sustainable IT? Why now? For this, we need to look at some of the facts. According to the United Nations Environment Programme, the tech sector is responsible for 2 to 3% of the global greenhouse gases that are emitted. Yeah, 2 to 3%. I see some people nodding. Hey, it's not too much. Why do you even need to talk about it? It doesn't sound too much until the time you compare it to the aviation industry, touted to be one of the most polluting industries, and that also emits 2%. And we are not even talking about the global e-waste problem. According to the World Health Organization, in 2019, around 53 million tons of e-waste were generated globally, and out of which only 20% was collected and documented to be recycled efficiently. So that's a lot of impact, because of the tech industry and the software that we write. So we need to take steps in order to address this challenge. And the challenges, if I look at it, are twofold. One is the hardware side, or the infrastructure, and the other is the software. So let's explore these two parts. First, the hardware and the infrastructure side. You might be knowing that most organizations nowadays are moving to the cloud, right? It was a trend in the past, but now it's business as usual. Every company has some presence either in Microsoft or Amazon or Google Cloud, for example, these being the major cloud providers. But moving to the cloud is a step in the right direction. Because on one hand, for the businesses, they don't have to invest millions in procuring expensive hardware, building data centers, or hiring skilled people in order to maintain these data centers around the clock. So the capital expenditure is reduced drastically. Major cloud providers, they are also scalable and they are also reliable with backup centers spread across the globe. But coming to our topic, are they sustainable? Most of the major cloud providers that I mentioned, they are having carbon neutral data centers, and they're also aiming towards net zero emissions. So in a way, moving to the cloud is a step in the right direction. But it is also a double-edged sword, right? Because moving to the cloud, it offers you the flexibility for the cloud engineers to spin virtual machines on the fly. But the flip side is that there are instances where virtual machines are left running on weekends, during non-business hours, and that too in the quality and the development environments where it is not needed. So these practices, what happens is it makes it not only more expensive, but it also not a sustainable practice, right? So this is a topic that is dealt with in the FinOps Foundation. FinOps is an emerging area which talks about how do we make effective utilization of cloud resources. Organizations need to train their engineers, train their DevOps teams to be in this particular area and get them FinOps certified. There also needs to be a central governance of a central DevOps team in order to drive optimal resource utilization. And this can be done when you have cloud utilization dashboards that also recommend the ideal way in which the cloud resources can be utilized. So these are some steps that we can take on the infrastructure side. Now we go the other path. What about the software? That's where green software comes in place. Green Software Foundation is a non-profit foundation set up by Microsoft, GitHub, Accenture, ThoughtWorks, along with the Linux Foundation. It's a non-profit, and it is a platform and a standard ecosystem for best practices and tooling towards green software. I encourage you to visit this website. There's a lot of active projects going on in the Green Software Foundation where you can also actively contribute. To find out more about green software, they also have, as a bonus, in a tie-up with the Linux Foundation, a free online course that you can follow, and you can become green software practitioners. It's a good boost to your LinkedIn profile. So, for all the Bill Gates fans out there, Microsoft also has a course on the principles of sustainable software methodology. I suggest you to visit both these courses and get up to speed with what is sustainable IT, what is green software, and other related topics. But what do these courses cover? It basically talks about green software. And what is green software? Green software is carbon efficient software. So that is the software that emits the least amount of carbon possible. And this can be achieved by addressing three major topics. One is energy efficiency, the second is hardware efficiency, and the third is carbon awareness. Energy efficiency deals with how do we consume the least amount of electricity possible when you're running your computations. Hardware efficiency talks about how can we use the least amount of embodied carbon. And carbon awareness is the timing and the place when you can run your computations. Data centers nowadays, they are using power usage effectiveness, or PUE, as a metric to measure their sustainability for the data center. What is PUE? It is a measure of how much energy the computing equipment takes in relation to the cooling and other overheads. Right? For example, if I say a data center's PUE is 1.0, that means computing is using all the energy for its computational needs. And when I say data center's PUE is 1.5, then when the power grid supplies 15 kilowatt of electricity to the data center, then the data center is using out of that 5 kilowatt just for the cooling and only 10 for the computation. So you can imagine that we need to be more efficient and have as close to a PUE of 1.0 for your data center. Right? So that's something we need to work towards as an organization. Carbon awareness. Carbon awareness talks about clean electricity as compared to dirty. So clean electricity is the electricity that is generated as a result of renewable energy. For example, you have solar power, you have wind farms, hydropower. This is all clean energy as opposed to fossil fuel electricity, right? So there should be more focus on doing your computation when the electricity is cleaner and not the other way around. How do we do this? There are broadly two methods to do this. What we can do is you shift the demand of the computation either by place or by time. So the first one is the spatial shifting. So when you have large computation that needs to be done, if possible, move the computation to a location that has more renewable energy. Right? So then that's called spatial shifting. We also have another way. You don't want to move your computation to a different location, but then you do have resources in your country or in your city for renewable resources, but let's say they work only during the day, maybe because of the solar, or it works better in the night because it's much windier in the night and you have wind farms set up. So then you go for temporal shifting. Right? You can move your computation to a different time when it is more clean electricity. So these are some of the ways in which we can tackle this problem of reducing your carbon intensity. We also have to look at the hardware efficiency. So here it talks about using the least amount of embodied carbon possible. So what is embodied carbon? Embodied carbon is whenever you manufacture your servers or your laptops, what is the amount of carbon that was emitted during the manufacture and also when you finally you write off the device, as in when you have to dispose the device. So that is called as embodied carbon. And the aim here is to use the least amount of embodied carbon as possible. How do we do that? So we can improve this hardware efficiency by two ways. So one is for the individual users when you have your end user devices, you can try to extend the lifespan of the devices. So whenever there is a latest powerful Mac, Apple released a new Mac recently, you don't need that new Mac, but you want it, right? So request you to give more importance to the needs rather than the wants. So you can, as I said before, your smartphone has more power than the Apollo 11 guidance computers, which were used to send man to the moon. Right? So the computation that is available for you right now is enough for your basic needs, for the work needs. So extending the lifespan of the device helps in improving this hardware efficiency. But what about the cloud resources? That's where the FinOps topic also comes into place. When you are allocating resources, you need to make sure that whichever virtual machines or databases that you have set up on the cloud, they are used as optimally as possible. So that the utilization increases and then hardware efficiency also improves. So now we looked at the theoretical aspects. How about the practical aspects? Yeah, now you want to do something. How do we take action now? What are the ways in which we can take this action? Again, there are two ways: enterprise, and then you have individual contributions. So let's go through one by one. How many of you have heard of the Paris Agreement? Oh, nice. So then you might know what these numbers mean. In 2016, the Paris Agreement was signed. 195 is the amount of number of countries that signed this agreement. But what was this agreement on? These were for achieving certain climate goals, right? And one of the major goals was for the countries to take steps in order to reduce the global rise in temperature with less than 2 degrees as compared to pre-industrial levels. And the ideal target is 1.5 degrees and not more. And this is a very challenging target because, as you see, you can already see that the emissions have to be cut by 50% by 2030 in order to achieve this target. So, of course, then the countries have to commit a lot more in terms of actions, and that is outlined in their nationally determined contributions, or NDCs. When the countries have made the commitment at the Paris conference, at the Paris Agreement, they also have to make sure the companies in that country also are impacted because of this commitment. And that's why there are regulations now, especially within the European Union. A lot of regulations are coming up for companies to enforce how to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. And especially for tech companies, they need to reduce the digital carbon footprint, right? But how do companies then address this? One of the ways is to look at it from the enterprise architecture point of view. You might have heard of these terms if you are familiar with architecture. And TOGAF, Zachman, all these architecture frameworks, they are now evolving to incorporate sustainability within their standards. So, for example, TOGAF, the open group, they have released their Environmentally Sustainable Information Systems Guideline. This is a framework that organizations can use where it helps you to understand what is the purpose of a digital sustainability capability and how do you develop this within your organization. Are there any practical methods? For instance, the Open Group Open Footprint Forum has developed certain models which you can implement in your organization in order to calculate the carbon footprint of your applications. Technical challenge is easily solved, according to me. It's the culture change that's even more challenging. That is also, there are some suggestions in the Open Group guideline which talk about how do you develop this sustainable digital culture by means of training your employees or conducting education programs in this particular topic. And finally, for an organization, in order for them to survive, the business model also should be very robust and sustainable. There is a guideline within the framework which also talks about how do you reshape your business architecture so that the carbon footprint is kept in mind, and then you are still making revenue, right? So it's a win-win for both parties. Finally, there are a lot of service providers, IT strategic partners that are working with businesses, especially in the tech sector. This guideline also asks them to commit towards providing an end-to-end environmental footprint, right? So it's not only the major cloud providers who have to say, we are going to go and become net zero, but also the software providers, the strategic partners. They also have to make a certain level of commitment. So these initiatives should be taken up by the enterprises in order to move towards the right direction of sustainable IT. But what about individuals, like you and me? Of course, organizations are made up of you and me, but then It is organizations, it's more a top-down approach, and from individuals, it's more a bottom-up. What can we do? Once you, let's say you took my suggestion, you went to the Green Software Foundation, got yourself certified as and became Green Software practitioners. You also became FinOps certified, and then you have this amount of knowledge that you want very eager to share. Maybe in the next conference, you are here on stage to talk about sustainable IT. But that is also a method in which we can contribute. For example, in my company, in my present organization, we have a community called the sustainability community. It not only talks about IT sustainability, but also sustainability in the day-to-day life. So how do you, make sure you are sustainable with your gardening, with your reduced use of plastic, for example, and these kind of topics. But then for me, the focus is more on sustainable IT. We organize events, we organize hackathons, and we promote this culture of sustainable technology within the company. You can also do that within your organizations and bring about a culture change and a mindset change for people to also talk about this topic. The Green Software Foundation that I talked about earlier, they also have a very active forum where experts from around the world, professors from universities who are mainly focused and doing their PhDs in this topic, they are very active as well in these forums. You can reach out to them in these forums and get your knowledge updated. Also, you can start meetup groups in your country, in your city. For example, in the Netherlands, we have, this is my colleague here. You see here, Chris Tapper. He's my colleague from Rabobank. He started the Sustainable IT Netherlands, along with colleagues from Microsoft, Netherlands. So these forums are active communities where you can contribute and also get to know more about this topic. For example, Green Software Foundation earlier this year organized Carbon Hack. It's good to talk about theory and a lot of knowledge on sustainable IT, but can you see a practical application of it? That was proven in this Carbon Hack. They released what you call as the impact framework. It is a plugin that you can use to assess the carbon footprint of your software application. And this hackathon was put to test that particular framework. So you can, by participating in these communities, you can also participate in these hackathons and improve your knowledge. So, to summarize, today we talked about why we need to acknowledge sustainable IT and green software. What is green software? And how to build expertise around it. And then what are the ways in which we can make the most impact, both enterprise and individual. I leave you now with the last slide on the United Nations Act Now. Have you heard of the Act Now campaign? Oh, okay, at least one person. Act Now is a United Nations campaign to inspire individuals like you and me to work on the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. I think there are 17 goals. And you can contribute to each of those goals when you visit this webpage. If you think your contribution as an individual does not make much of an impact, if you're having doubts about that, think of the butterfly effect. Have you heard of the butterfly effect? According to chaos theory, when a butterfly flaps its wings somewhere in the Amazonian jungles in South America, it sets off a chain of events that leads to a cyclone in North America. Such is that impact of that small action, and such is the power of that small butterfly. Ladies and gentlemen, I see that butterfly in each one of you. So flutter away, take action, and make an impact. Thank you. Any questions? Yeah. So the question is, if I have a practical example of how you can change a culture of an organization, right? Yeah. We are in the European Union, especially within Europe. So we are at an advantage because how much ever you shout standing on a mountain, organizations will make a change only if it makes them money or if there is a regulation, right? So within Europe, that regulation part is really strong. So the Paris Agreement for one, even for the AI, there is an AI Act that was introduced. So organizations cannot just go and move to the latest technology, but they also have to make sure what is the impact. There is a reporting aspect that comes in. What is the carbon footprint of your organization? What are your scope 1, 2, and 3 emission? You might have heard of scope 1 and 2 and 3 emissions, right? So that's the amount of emissions, different kinds of emissions. So scope 1, I think, is about the direct electricity consumption that leads to carbon emission. Scope 2 is, I think, your service provider. And scope 3 is the end customers, how much they use as a result, how much electricity they use as a result of using your product. So organizations have to report that as well as a consequence of the Paris Agreement, right? So that is when a regulation comes in place, then automatically the management also sees, okay, let's do something about it. But then bottom-up approach I suggested earlier, that also helps. The sustainability community within Rabobank, it started off with a couple of hundred members. And within a span of 6 months, we are now 2,000 plus members across the world in Rabobank. And everybody is keen on contributing something to this particular initiative. So you as an individual can start this culture change within your organization by organizing meetups within your company with like-minded individuals, and then set off that chain of events, right? So that's a way in which you can bring about this culture change. You are being helped by the regulations, of course, but you can make an impact by starting these initiatives. Any other questions? If not, thank you very much for attending this talk. I wish you a nice day. Thank you.